All right, welcome team. Hello, my name is Linda Kinning, and we're going to spend some time today talking about failure, specifically why your startup might fail. And if you have been in a class with me before or read things about startup, talking about failure is pretty common. It's important. It's an important value we talk about. But it seems to come up less when we're talking about pitching. And so we're going to invert that a little bit. But I want to start with a story of something that looks like a success, that is a success, that spent a while looking like failure. And we're going to talk about Instagram today. And Instagram right now, you might know, might be on your phone. It's certainly on mine, is a multi-billion-dollar company, but it didn't start that way. And so we're going to go back into the Wayback Machine to 2010, when Instagram was first launched in a very different form and a different name. So in 2010, what we know as Instagram was called Bourbon, and it was a check-in app that let users share their location, make plans, sort of coordinate with each other, and post pictures of their meetup. If you're familiar with Foursquare, a little bit like that, plus some more planning. And they had funding, they had a team, they had users, but they realized like their adoption rate actually wasn't that great. And it was a little overbuilt. The app was complicated and users weren't using all the features that they thought they would. But the thing that they did keep getting is that the photo sharing component actually seemed to be the thing that people most consistently used. And instead of defending their original vision of this Foursquare photo sharing planning app, they stripped away everything else except the photo and the filters. They made a big pivot. They killed their darlings, and this became Instagram, which sold to Facebook just 18 months after this for $1 billion. This was a huge pivot that started when they realized that like people are not using this in the way that they thought. It looks a little bit like a failure. And that's one of the key lessons from this case study, but through a lot of other startups, is that the fastest path to success is finding those failure points early on. Fail fast, you might have heard. And that's why when we talk about pitching, it can be hard to hold both of these things. As an entrepreneur, you have to both say, here's all the reasons why it's going to win. Here are the numbers that'll prove it. Here's how we are so much more competitive than anyone else. Here's why we're confident we can make money in 24 months. Your job in pitching is to come up with this very clear, here's all the ways we'll win. And that is super important. And there are lots of great classes that we teach about that. But this class is actually going to focus on the other side of it, which is before you can pitch a winning story, you have to have a winning strategy for your idea. And great strategy is knowing all the ways that you can't win. It's anticipating all the things that people say, well, that can't possibly work. Tell me, I don't believe this piece. And having really good answers for why. It's knowing your traps and avoiding them. And so that's why today we're going to focus on why your startup will fail. And to do that, we have this anti-pitch framework. This is a tool that you can use for all of your ideas, but we're going to use it today together to go through another company that you might know. And we're going to discuss Airbnb, the anti-pitch framework. And if you've done the business model canvas or if you've built a pitch before, some of these components might look familiar, right? You need to know who your customer is. We were pitching a pitch to tell you why Airbnb would win. We tell you, here's the customer. They're young people. They're tired of hotels. You know, you can go through all the points of why this customer is the one for this company. Talk clearly about what the problem is, what's not working now, the solution, and then the business sense. How does this actually make money support itself? We're going to invert that. For customer, we want to know all the points for why nobody wants this. Why does this not work for people? We're going to talk about the problem and why it's not actually a real pain point. This is one of the number one things like stymies ideas and innovators from the very beginning is you think you have a big problem and other people don't. In this anti-pitch framework, we're going to really focus on understanding that problem and why it's not a real pain point. I'm going to talk about the solution. Why won't it work? And the business. Why can it not make money? And if you're sitting here thinking, wait, these are already the things going in my head. This is just the voice of self-doubt. I want you to hold that for a second. We will come back to it. But pulling that piece out is going to help us make stronger, better ideas. Okay, are we ready to do this together? Yes, excellent. So we're going to start at top left. We're going to start with this customer. Why do people not want this? I'm going to put the first offer. Why do people not want Airbnb? Airbnb meaning the company where you can rent places, rooms, apartments, homes, and other people's spaces. I think point number one is strangers won't trust each other. That feels like a really big blocker on the customer side. But I want to hear a few more. Our best anti-pitch is one where we come up with lots of ideas, lots of reasons why, so that we can systematically guard against them. So I'm going to be looking at the chat and I want to see a few hand raises. Give us some reasons. Pitch the other side of why the customers for Airbnb will fail. Why does nobody want this? Rishi.
The customers might not be able to find hotels in the happening areas, like where the hotels are located, or like they might not.
Yeah, so I'm gonna live right on this here. Customers, say that again. They might not be in the happening areas.
Yes.
Let's see. Users won't like selection of listings. Put this in some of my own language. Correct me if you feel these things are otherwise. What else? Yes, Hasibur.
The risk of property damage from the renter's perspective, like why would I rent to a stranger? For a
Yeah.
few days, obviously.
Rent to a stranger, right? So when we talk about customer, there are two sides of this. There's the renters and there's the property owners. That's huge. Like the liability and risk of renting is too high. Absolutely. Keshav.
Another problem might be that what we are offering the customer and what the customer is actually getting. So the gap between these two.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna put the listings might not match expectations of, we'll call them lodgers, people who are getting it. What else? I'm looking for some other hands. See if we can get one more on customer.
The customer might not be able to get all the facilities that a hotel provides.
Yes, huge. It might not stack up to the competition. Let's see. Customer. Many amenities compared to hotel. Great. All right, now I want to move into the problem. So what Airbnb says in the real pitch is this is more convenient, it's more accessible, it's cheaper. People are not satisfied with the current options of hotels. Why is this not a real pain point? Let's play the other side. What's the anti-pitch? And one point is people might just prefer hotels with consistent quality. It de-risks it. You know what it looks like. What else? How else might this not be a real pain point? Andrew.
I'd say like affordability. So affordability of going to an Airbnb isn't guaranteed. Uh, so a host might ask for a higher price even than you'd get like a local motel or a hotel.
Yes. It might not actually be competitive. It might cost a lot of money and time and work to get in people's homes to be as competitive with hotels in a way that like that the math won't work out. Great. What else? How is this not a real problem? Yeah, Thomas. Thomas and then Layla.
I could imagine like it's not like every hotel room is always full every night, so there's still plenty of supply in the hotel market. Why do we need more?
Yes. Right. If there's plenty of room, hotels can be more competitive. If there's a lot of supply, why do we need this additional piece? Great. I saw Layla raise a hand or unmic.
Yes,
Layla, I guess.
sorry. I was thinking about creating actually new problems such as fostering gentrification, household shortage for residents, and so on. So not only
Yeah.
not tackling a problem, but creating more.
I love that. That's a huge, huge point. Like if our great idea creates a bunch of new problems, like that might also cause this to fail. Hasibur.
I was literally going to talk about the same thing that Layla did, so I'll just add a bit to that, like how a community can lose its identity. Because like if you open your door, if you're like an old community, you live in a very congested way, everyone is known everyone, but all of a sudden there are a lot of strangers coming in just for the sake of tourism, then how does that impact the community itself?
Yes. Right. If you're trying to solve one problem, but accidentally create a bunch of others, like there will be some pushback to that. Great. Let's move to solution. So this is thinking about what is the solution of Airbnb? It's listings, it's individuals offering rooms, maybe their whole house. It's an online portal and component. You don't necessarily have to meet the person you're staying with in order to stay there. It tends to be more short term. Why does that solution, this virtual digital matchmaking of spaces, why will that not work? Hasibur.
They might struggle with the insurance of the property. Like if it get damages, they might have to pay more than what they're expecting.
Yes. Yes. Insurance might just kill this idea from the beginning. Being able to verify listings. There's a lot of like trust and verification here on both sides.
Can we also say that maybe at some point it's hard to give them like the quality of hotels that they want, or they really want them to be on the list?
Ooh, say that part again.
Like these won't work because the hotels that have been listed don't match their quality and
Yeah.
being real them. Yeah.
Yes. Listings may not be trusted, hard to, I'm going to abbreviate this QA, the quality assurance may be hard. Great. Rishi.
Regulatory issues like house owners association, or like if there are some government regulations that needs to be like, tackled.
Yeah, like pushback from homeowners associations, I'm going to abbreviate that, HOAs, and government. Hasibur, and then Ayushi.
I'm talking a lot about the renter's perspective. So the other one that came to my mind is like, how do you report your earnings, like the taxes and everything, when you're sharing your space?
Right? This creates a whole, we're talking about a whole other revenue stream in a place of people's homes that hasn't been used before. Like, how do you report earnings? How to, manage this as revenue stream. Great. Ayushi.
This might also be too dangerous, so to speak, for the customers because they're going and living in a stranger's house. And in that way, it's too much of a liability for a company because even the renters are not the company staff, so to speak. So they can't come under the purview of regulatory policies that the company has for its own staff members.
Absolutely. And there's the risk of, it's like sort of gig worker economy, but like not exactly and in a new way. Great. Keshav.
I'm also aligned with what Ayushia just said, that to ensure the security of persons and property of the customers will be a challenge there. And particularly, I'm talking about for instance, the privacy concerns might be a serious issue to the customers.
Yeah, on both sides, both renters and users, is ensuring safety and privacy. You're now putting a company and saying, we want to be the middleman between your home. That's a lot of risk and responsibility. Layla.
I was thinking about scalability issues, which tangentially touch upon, for example, the first one, which is can verify if listings are real. So as we grow, how can we ensure, for example, a minimum quality standards and so on? Is it possible?
Yes. Great. Hard to scale, especially with like quality concerns. Wonderful. Okay. Now, these are starting to get into some of the business things as well. Of course, these things are all connected, but it's helpful to think about them in discrete parts to direct our thinking. So I want us to move into this last quadrant of the business side of things. Why will this not make money? In theory, right, we could imagine a world where, great, you can solve the trust problem, you solve the insurance, the governments don't fight about it, it's a real thing. But if the math doesn't work out, there's a limit to the business's viability. And so what are the ways we really put on the Airbnb, the business perspective hat, and say that even if this is a cool idea and even if it solves a problem, we just can't make money at it. It's not going to be self-supporting. What are some of our anti-pitch points for Airbnb's business failure? Yes, Thomas.
The business travel will never leave the hotel economy.
Yes. So even if it's a cool idea, like business travel is locked in. And that's where a lot of the travel is. Biggest competitor. Great. Andrew.
So, competition. So as more hosts continue to join, the prices go down, and so at the end of the day, the revenue for Airbnb and the host is going down altogether.
Yeah, it could be, I'm going to put this as like race to the bottom for listing revenues. Great. Ronnie.
What I have is almost similar to what Thomas said, that it is counter to the culture of hospitality.
Yeah, I love that. Counter to the culture of hospitality. So much of hospitality industry, hotels, is about service. Here, we'll make things easy. There's a person there who'll meet you and take care of you. Airbnb says, no, you can take care of yourself and you can do it in this place you don't know. That might break it completely. Apollinaire.
I'm thinking that the pricing of the house might not be only dependent on the Airbnb, administration, but also on the house owner, which might make prices maybe too high or too low, and it won't really benefit the company itself.
Yeah, so like real estate is highly location specific. I'm trying to get at this point of saying, yeah, I think what you've named it well, that like the cost of what does it cost to own a place, to rent a place, to get a room in New York City is going to be different than in a small town elsewhere. And so the dependencies of value and property costs are just so different. Great. Hasibur.
Airbnb is very reliant on the tourism trend because, like, as Thomas mentioned, they don't get a lot of business travelers. So one single pandemic might kill them, or like any event that relates to tourism.
Yeah. Yeah. So highly reliant on tourism. Yes. Could wipe out business with we'll know what that piece is. Great. Layla.
The introduction of regulatory constraints to mitigate speculation, for example, or short-term rentals.
Yes. Short-term rentals and great. Yes, the regulation. Governments could say, yikes, we don't want this at all. It's not going to be taxes like business revenue, like the same way hotels are, like we're not into it. Rishi.
There is going to be some inherent cap on margins that they can charge. Because like too much margins, like the listers will like delist, and too low margins, one can't cover overheads and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, there might just be some margin. There's like a limit to what people are willing to spend on one night. Like, can the revenue actually cover costs? And Keshav.
I think that it was covered by Hasibur. Is like there may be the circumstances like we just have faced the COVID-19 period. So in that way, the demand and the need of this particular thing gets declined. So that business may be the idea may be the good, but in business perspective, it may fall short.
Yes. That like if we're looking at this in a post-pandemic world, there's some real macro trends that like just people's travel realities have shifted a lot. That might break the business. Okay, wonderful. This is a big list of problems of all of the ways that this will fail. And you might be looking at this and thinking, oh, well, what could we do next? And we want to start by saying that like lists of problems are only helpful if they help us make decisions. Otherwise, you look at that and it's overwhelm. And often entrepreneurs, ideas, thinkers, you've probably been in this position yourself. You can look at a big list of reasons for why it'll fail, and you either give up or get defensive. Say, yikes, that's too big a problem, not for me. Or, well, those aren't true. That one's not real. I don't believe it. Surely I believe something different. And so instead of giving up or getting defensive, we're going to take this big list of problems, the big list of why this won't work out, and we're going to use it to experiment. We're going to use it to analyze and rebut. And so this phase, we're going to take our strongest anti-pitch points. We came up with that big list, chosen a few. We're going to take the strongest anti-pitch points. We're going to turn them into how might we statements. How might we is a construction, a way, a method, taking a problem and opening it up. How might we make things different? We'll get into that piece specifically. And then we will brainstorm some experiments that could help us de-risk that. Give us some options. How do we take that big failure point, open it up to explore it with the how might we, and then run some experiments to get some better data and some options to go forward. So we're going to do this part together. And I want to start with what I think is one of the biggest strongest anti-pitch points that we talked about is strangers won't trust each other. If you can't solve the trust problem, there's absolutely no business, can't go further. And so I want to turn to you all and ask, how might we turn this, what sentence could help us open up this anti-pitch point? Strangers won't trust each other. Saw my little preview here. How might we build trust between strangers? It's simple. It opens it up. And then we say, okay, well, what are our answers to that? How can we get creative? What are some experiments? So maybe an experiment is we start with verified communities. We start with communities that are actually already have trust built in. We don't have to manufacture it. We don't have to provide it. Where does that already exist? So in the case of Airbnb, back in the day, that this is something that they did. They started, instead of launching to everyone everywhere at the same time, they started with specific conferences in a specific city. They started with one, saying these people already sort of know each other. They're all coming, this big political conference. They're all coming to the same place. They sort of already know each other. This might be a lot easier. Build on that trust. And I want to ask, like, what are a few other experiments you can think of that could help build trust between strangers? What could we try? Keshav.
One important might be that to build that trust is to offer a refund if they do not get the service as per their expectations. So it will build a trust in them that we are confident about our services. That's why we are offering refund to them.
Yeah, I love that. So we start and say, we believe this so much. And if you trust us, if it doesn't work, we will refund you completely. We will take responsibility on that. That's one way to build trust. Great. Hasibor.
Have insurance for the host, like offer them like, hey, if something goes wrong, we'll cover it. No question asked.
Yeah. De-risk it. Again, saying we'll put our money where our mouth is. We think this is trustworthy. If you're concerned about insurance and liability, we'll cover it. No questions. Love it. Layla.
Build a solid review system. Detailed reviews, for example.
Yeah, detailed reviews on both parties. This was a really good host. Here's the things that were helpful. I felt safe, really good amenities, love the location, easy to get in, and on the lodger. Great. Apollinaire.
Have some sort of background check or strong identity check.
Right? You can add an appeal to those other bigger institutional standards. What are the ways we can bring in third-party background checks? Great. Andrew.
So kind of similar to what Leela said, but incentivize, like if someone has a good review, push them up in the rankings, and they get more customers, something like that.
Yeah, you can reward good behavior. There's a way that you can say, out of everyone who's used this, these are the most trustworthy hosts and the most trusted lodgers. Those people are going to maybe get priority access. We want to reward that behavior. Ayushi.
Set up structures or channels where the lodger and the renter can talk to each other, communicate, converse before a booking is confirmed.
Before it's confirmed, right? So say if getting to the booking confirmation is our last step, that's the most trust, where you say, yes, here's money, I will stay here. What are the steps we can do ahead of time to make trust? You could talk to each other, you could message, you could say, hey, Thomas, I'm interested in staying in your place. Can you tell me more? Are you a real person? You can build up some of that relationship beforehand. I love that. Great. So you can see this process. We can come up with a lot of different experiments, and then we can replicate this with all of our other points, take our strongest pitch points, turn those into how might we statements. We talked a lot about like liability, this like gentrification, some of these other macro trends. How do you compete against hotels? Could turn those into how might we be a more welcoming, more hospitable option than hotels. That sort of combines better that hospitality piece and the competition. We can brainstorm experiments to help us de-risk that. This is a process. And you've seen it, like we start with one point and it gives us 10 other options. And like there can be a lot of these sticky notes, a lot of direction. So what do we do next? How do we manage this flow? And I want to provide some guidance on what you can do here, because we spent some time talking about Airbnb, but you can apply this to any of the ideas that you have, that you're considering. But how do we make sense of it? And I think, you can take this framework and start with identifying all of those risks. What are the voices in your head, the other things? Put your most critical hat on. And instead of getting overwhelmed by all of them, prioritize those top 3. Then come up with 3 of those experiments that you want to actually test. We want to test a review system. Maybe you don't have time to pay for background checks for everyone or get a security clearance third-party verification system, but you can institute a review system. You're going to set clear timelines for testing to see, does that actually work? And then define your pivot and proceed criteria. This is how we take things that could be overwhelming of so many decisions and things that could go wrong and use it to help make decisions. It's also helpful to define, how do we know if this process is working? And I think that the list here is it helps you identify non-obvious failure points. This is why we go for volume at the beginning. What are the things we're not thinking about? What are some of these blind spots? It helps us lead to concrete experiments, gives us the action, not just the overwhelm of all the ways things can go wrong, but what do we do next? And each iteration will improve your concept. We're also getting specific rather than generic feedback. Instead of saying, here's the one thing people won't like, we get very specific. They won't like it because they don't trust. And in fact, we need to create mechanisms for more trust. And this last one can appeal to some of this heart of the entrepreneur pit. Is like, we love our ideas. We do defend them. And there's a lot of place and time to be defensive on our ideas and say, no, I believe this will work. And we need to be self-critical and we need to know our weakest points. And so this process can help make these solutions feel more innovative rather than defensive. And I want to end with just this thought that your competitive advantage is not having a perfect idea. None of you have perfect ideas. Instagram did not have a perfect idea. Infamously, one of the biggest investors early on said, like, cool, I'm going to give you my money. This is not $1 billion idea. It's not perfect. That investor was proven wrong. This goal is not perfection, but it is to understand our own weak points so that we are the best prepared to systematically solve them and to one experiment at a time. Everyone else is going to be telling you why things will fail. You should ask yourself that question first to be prepared for it. Thanks.